What's wrong with the engagement ring I gave my girlfriend? When I got down on one knee at the beach where we'd had our first date, Kiara dropped to her knees and cried, saying yes over and over. But then she saw the ring up close as I was putting it on her, and her face just dropped. She still let me put it on her finger, but her hand was shaking and she kept staring at it like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. On the drive home, she kept her ring hand covered in her lap, instead of admiring the ring like I'd expected. And when I asked if she liked it, she said, "I just can't believe you picked this," in this weird, hollow voice. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed by the proposal, but when we got home, she immediately took the ring off and put it in the box, saying she didn't want to damage it. We almost had a fight over it when she almost forgot to put it back on the next morning. We went to brunch with our parents, and that's when her mom saw it. She literally gasped. Her dad didn't even seem happy or say congratulations, just asked if I was trying to make some kind of statement. When I said no, I just thought it was beautiful. He exchanged this look with his wife like they were communicating telepathically. Kiara's mom pulled her aside and I heard her whisper, "You don't have to go through with this," which made no sense because they'd always loved me. Kiara posted our engagement announcement on social media, but cropped out the photo of the ring saying the lighting wasn't good. When her friends asked to see it in the comments, she kept making excuses about waiting to get professional photos taken. Her best friend Mia came over that night, and when Kiara showed her the ring, Mia just said, "Oh my god, he actually did that," and left without even congratulating us. I posted in 3 different wedding forums asking for advice about why everyone was acting strange about the ring and included detailed photos from every angle. Every single post got deleted within minutes, and I was banned from 2 forums for obvious rage bait and trolling the community with offensive content. One moderator messaged me saying if the photos were real, I should be ashamed of myself. At work, I mentioned getting engaged, and my coworker asked to see the ring photo on my phone. She looked at it for about 2 seconds before handing my phone back like it was contaminated and saying, "That's certainly a choice." By lunch, everyone in the office was whispering, and my manager pulled me aside to say that while my personal life was my business, I should be mindful of professional boundaries. I went back to the jeweler thinking maybe there was something wrong. The jeweler remembered me and said he stood by his work, and the ring was exactly what I'd asked for with genuine materials and expert craftsmanship. When I asked if other customers had issues with similar designs, he said he'd never made another ring like this, and probably never would again. Kiara started wearing the ring only when we were alone and keeping it in the box whenever we went anywhere. When I confronted her, she said she just didn't want to lose it, but I could tell she was lying. Her sister saw it at family dinner and immediately said, "Please tell me that's not the real ring." And when Kiara nodded, her sister actually left the table. I asked my mom what she thought, and when I showed her the picture, she went completely silent before asking if I'd bought it as a joke. When I said no, she asked if I'd been having mental health issues and suggested I see someone. Kiara's friends started declining our wedding planning meetings, and her cousin, who'd agreed to be a bridesmaid, backed out saying she had scheduling conflicts. When we went to look at venues, the wedding coordinator saw the ring and asked if we were sure we wanted to move forward with booking. Kiara started crying in the car afterwards, saying she couldn't do this anymore. I begged her to just tell me what was wrong with the ring, but she kept saying if I couldn't see it myself, then that was the whole problem. I examined it under a magnifying glass looking for hidden symbols or offensive imagery, but it looked completely normal to me. I even had it appraised by a different jeweler who said it was worth exactly what I'd paid and was certainly unique but technically well made. After 2 months, Kiara said she needed to talk and gave me the ring back. She said she tried to be okay with it because she loved me, but she couldn't marry someone who would think that ring was acceptable. She said her friends and family had staged an intervention, asking her what kind of person would give that ring, and she couldn't defend me anymore. When I asked one last time what was wrong with it, she just shook her head and said, "The fact that you genuinely don't know makes this so much worse." She left and blocked my number, and when I tried to sell the ring online, the listing got flagged and removed within hours. Even pawn shops wouldn't take it with one owner saying he didn't want that kind of energy in his store. I kept the ring in my apartment and looked at it every single day, trying to understand what everyone else saw that I didn't see. It was literally a classic oval-shaped diamond, with small sapphires around the band, because blue was Kiara's favorite color. I thought it was just a beautiful normal ring, but I had no idea how wrong I was. That first night after Kiara left, I sat at my desk with the ring under my lamp for hours. I turned it slowly, watching the diamond catch the light from every possible angle. The oval stone sparkled perfectly, and the little blue sapphires around the band glowed like tiny stars. I grabbed a magnifying glass and examined every single detail, looking for scratches or flaws or hidden symbols. Nothing looked wrong to me at all. I stayed up until 4 in the morning just staring at this ring that had destroyed my whole life. My eyes burned from focusing so hard, but I kept looking, desperate to see whatever horrible thing everyone else saw. When the sun came up, I hadn't slept at all, but I had an idea. Maybe if I drew the ring from memory, I'd notice something my eyes were missing when I looked directly at it. I found some paper and a pencil and started sketching, carefully drawing the oval shape and adding the sapphires one by one. My hand moved across the page, recreating every curve and angle I'd memorized from staring at it all night. The drawing took me an hour to finish, and when I held it up, it looked exactly like the real ring. Just a normal, pretty engagement ring with nothing weird about it at all. I was running late for work, but I folded up the sketch and shoved it in my pocket. At the office, I pretended to work on spreadsheets while really just thinking about the ring. During lunch, I pulled out the sketch and left it on my desk while I went to the break room. When I came back, 3 of my coworkers were standing near my cubicle with these weird looks on their faces. They scattered as soon as they saw me coming, but I noticed how they kept glancing back at my desk. One of them actually shuddered before turning away. I grabbed the sketch and stuffed it back in my pocket, my face burning with embarrassment. That evening, I knocked on my neighbor Mrs. Ching's door with the ring box in my hand. She'd lived next door for 10 years and always told me exactly what she thought about everything. I figured if anyone would be straight with me, she would. She opened the door and smiled until she saw the box in my hand. I opened it to show her the ring, and her whole face changed. She actually crossed herself and stepped back into her apartment. "Get that thing away from me," she said in this shaky voice. She slammed the door before I could even ask what was wrong. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and started searching for answers online. I typed in everything I could think of about oval diamonds and sapphires and symbolic meanings. Maybe the combination meant something bad in some culture I didn't know about. I spent hours reading about gemstone meanings and jewelry symbolism and wedding traditions from around the world. Everything I found said oval diamonds meant eternal love and sapphires meant loyalty and truth. Nothing explained why everyone acted like my ring was cursed or evil. The searches just showed me normal wedding websites with happy couples and beautiful rings that looked a lot like mine. Over the next few days, things got even weirder. The delivery guy from the Chinese place always came right to my door, but after I answered once while holding the ring box, he stopped. Now he just left the food downstairs by the mailboxes and texted me to come get it. The same thing happened with my Amazon packages and even the pizza delivery. It was like word had spread that my apartment was somewhere to avoid. A week after Kiara left, I decided to take the ring photos to different jewelry stores. I printed out pictures from every angle and went to 5 different shops, pretending I wanted something similar made. The first jeweler looked at the photos for maybe 2 seconds before sliding them back across the counter. "We can't help you," he said. The second place suggested I consider a completely different design without even explaining why. The third jeweler, an older woman with gray hair, looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. "The proportions are unfortunate," she said quietly. When I asked what she meant, she just shook her head. "Have you considered talking to someone about why you can't see it?" she asked. She handed me a business card for a therapist before I left. The 4th and 5th stores basically threw me out the second they saw the photos. I was starting to think everyone else was crazy, not me. Maybe I needed to get my eyes checked because obviously something was wrong with how I was seeing this ring. I made an appointment with an eye doctor for the next day, telling them I was having vision problems. The optometrist ran every test she had, checking my vision from every angle and distance. She dilated my pupils and shined lights in my eyes and made me read charts until my head hurt. After an hour of tests, she sat back in her chair looking confused. "Your vision is perfect," she said. "Why did you really come here?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the ring photo. The clipboard fell out of her hands and clattered on the floor. Her face went white, and she stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the wall. "You need to leave," she said, not even picking up her clipboard. She opened the door and stood there waiting for me to go. As I walked past her, she muttered something about some things that can't be unseen. I heard her lock the door behind me as soon as I stepped into the hallway. I stood in that hallway for a minute trying to process what just happened before heading back to my apartment. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about everyone's reactions, so I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures of the ring from every angle I could think of. I laid it on the kitchen counter and shot it from above, then from the side, then at a 45-degree angle. I put it under my desk lamp and took close-ups of the diamond, the band, the sapphires. I even balanced it on its side to get a profile view. Each photo looked perfect to me, just a beautiful engagement ring catching the light. I created an anonymous account on Reddit and posted the photos to a jewelry forum asking for honest opinions about the design. Within 10 minutes, the post was removed, and my account was banned for violating community standards. I tried again on a different forum with a new account, and the same thing happened. I posted to a general advice subreddit, and it got flagged immediately. 3 different moderators sent me messages saying I was sick for posting that kind of content. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee, and it was my building manager. He said several tenants had complained about me approaching them in the hallway yesterday, trying to show them something inappropriate. I told him I was just asking about a ring, but he cut me off and said if there were any more complaints, he'd have to start eviction proceedings. After he hung up, I realized I had shown the ring to maybe 4 or 5 neighbors over the past week, and they must have all reported me. I spent the rest of the morning searching online for psychologists who specialized in perception disorders. I found one who had written papers about visual processing issues and called her office. The receptionist said they had an opening that afternoon due to a cancellation, so I took it. The office was in a medical building downtown, and when I walked in, the psychologist introduced herself and asked what brought me in. I pulled out my phone and showed her the ring photos, explaining that everyone else saw something disturbing, but I couldn't see it. She looked at the photos for maybe 5 seconds before putting my phone down on her desk face down. She asked me to describe what I saw when I looked at the ring. I told her about the oval diamond, how it caught the light, the way the sapphires were spaced evenly around the band, the classic 4-prong setting that held the main stone. She took notes the whole time I talked, her pen moving faster and faster across the page. Her face got more and more concerned as I described each detail. She asked why I chose this specific design, and I explained that I wanted something timeless and elegant with Kiara's favorite color. She wrote that down too, and then asked if we could explore my background a bit. Over the next 3 sessions, we went through my whole childhood, looking for anything that might explain my perception issue. She asked about my relationship with my parents, any traumatic events, my education, my previous relationships. We talked about how I met Kiara, our relationship dynamics, what marriage meant to me. She kept coming back to questions about my intentions with the ring design, asking if I was trying to send a message or make a statement. I kept telling her I just wanted something beautiful, but she'd write that down and ask again in a different way. She asked about my understanding of symbols and shapes, if I'd studied art or design, if I had any interest in occult or religious imagery. After our 3rd session, she said she needed to consult with colleagues and would call me to schedule our next appointment. While I waited to hear back from her, I remembered my college friend who became an art professor. I found him on social media and sent him a message saying I needed his professional opinion on something. He responded pretty quickly, but when I mentioned it was about the ring that was causing problems, he said we could only meet in a public place. We agreed on a coffee shop near the university the next afternoon. I got there early and had the photos ready on my phone. He showed up right on time, but sat across from me with his coat still on like he might need to leave quickly. I slid my phone across the table with the photos pulled up. He glanced at them for maybe 2 seconds before sliding the phone back to me. He said the composition created what he called a deeply uncomfortable visual narrative, but when I asked him to explain, he just shook his head. He told me some things were better left unexamined and got up to leave. I grabbed his arm and begged him to help me understand, but he pulled away and said he couldn't be involved with this. That night, I started having dreams about the ring. In the dreams, everyone around me could see something floating above it, like a shadow or a shape that was obvious to them but invisible to me. I'd wake up and immediately look at the ring, searching for whatever was in the dream, but it looked the same as always. The dreams got more intense each night, with the shadow getting darker and more defined, but I still couldn't make out what it was supposed to be. After a week of these dreams, I decided to hire a private investigator to look into the jeweler who made the ring. I found a PI through an online directory and met him at his office. I explained that I wanted to know if the jeweler had deliberately sabotaged my ring somehow. The PI took the case and said he'd have preliminary findings within a few days. When he called me back, he said the jeweler had no criminal record, no complaints filed against him, nothing unusual in his background. But he mentioned something interesting. The The jeweler had retired immediately after making my ring and moved out of state. The PI had the jeweler's new address, and I decided I had to talk to him in person. I drove 6 hours to find him living in a small house in a retirement community. When he answered the door, he recognized me immediately and his face went pale. I begged him to explain what he'd done to the ring. He invited me in, and we sat in his living room where he swore he'd only followed my exact specifications. He pulled out a folder from a desk drawer and showed me his original notes from our consultation, plus the sketches he'd made based on my description. He said when he saw the final result, he knew he should have said something, but I seemed so happy with it that he let me take it. I looked closer at the sketches he spread out on the coffee table, and my stomach dropped because they really did look different from what I was holding in my hand. The sketches showed a simple oval with small stones around the band, clean and normal looking. But when I held the actual ring next to the drawings, something was off even though I couldn't name what. The jeweler kept pointing at specific spots on the paper, then at the ring, tracing lines with his finger like he was showing me something obvious, but my eyes just couldn't track whatever he was trying to highlight. He pulled out more papers from the folder, receipts and work orders and photos he'd taken during the process, and in each one the ring looked slightly different, like it was changing shape as he made it. I spent another hour there going through everything, taking photos of his sketches with my phone, but he finally asked me to leave because his wife was getting upset about having me in their home. The drive back took 6 hours, and I couldn't stop thinking about those sketches, pulling over twice to compare the photos on my phone to the actual ring sitting in its box on my passenger seat. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside a Catholic church downtown, even though I hadn't been to church since I was a kid. The priest was in his office doing paperwork when I knocked, and he smiled, and was invited me in until I pulled out the ring box. His whole body went rigid when I opened it, and he actually pushed his chair back from his desk, like I'd shown him something dangerous. He told me this wasn't a spiritual problem, and suggested I needed professional help for whatever made me create this. Then he asked me to leave his office immediately. That night, I found an online forum for people with perception disorders, thinking maybe I'd finally found people who would understand. I typed up my whole story, attached photos from every angle, and posted it in their support section. Within 10 minutes, my post was deleted, and I got a message from the moderator saying I was banned for trolling vulnerable people with obscene content, and if I tried to create another account, they'd report me to the site administrators. My phone rang the next morning, and it was my mom saying my sister was flying in from Colorado because she'd told her I was having some kind of crisis. I tried to tell my mom I was fine, but she said my sister had already bought the ticket and would be there that afternoon. I picked my sister up at the airport, and she hugged me tight, studying my face like she was looking for signs of illness or drugs or something. We went back to my apartment and I made coffee while she sat on my couch, and when I brought out the ring box, her whole demeanor changed. She opened it, looked for maybe 1 second, then started crying and asking what happened to me to make me think this was okay. She kept saying she didn't understand how her brother could make something like this, like I'd become a completely different person. She stayed for 3 days and kept suggesting we visit our childhood home, thinking maybe something from our past would explain why I couldn't see what everyone else saw. Our parents still lived in the same house 2 hours away, so we drove out there on a Saturday morning and spent the whole day going through photo albums and old home videos. My sister kept asking if I remembered specific events, teachers, friends, anything that might explain this blind spot, but nothing stood out as unusual. We looked through my old drawings, school projects, art class assignments, searching for any pattern or symbol that matched the ring, but found nothing. My mom made dinner and we sat around the table like when we were kids, but the whole time my sister kept looking at me with this worried expression. She flew home the next day after making me promise to see a doctor, not just a therapist, but an actual medical doctor who could check if something was physically wrong with my brain. I made an appointment with a neurologist the following week, telling the receptionist I needed to be evaluated for possible visual processing issues. The neurologist was a woman in her 50s who listened to my whole story without interrupting, took notes, then ordered a full set of brain scans, including an MRI and CT scan. I spent a whole day at the hospital getting tested, lying in machines while they scanned my brain from every angle looking for tumors or lesions or anything that might affect how I see things. The results came back completely normal, no abnormalities, no tumors, nothing that would explain why I couldn't see what everyone else saw in the ring. The neurologist seemed puzzled and referred me to a specialist who studied rare cognitive conditions, saying this was beyond her expertise. The specialist worked at a research hospital and had published papers on visual agnosia and other perception disorders. He examined the ring photos on my phone, had me do various visual tests, then sat back in his chair and said he'd seen similar cases where people literally couldn't perceive certain visual patterns. He explained it might be selective visual agnosia, where my brain couldn't process whatever specific pattern everyone else was seeing, and he said while it was extremely rare, there were documented cases in medical literature going back decades. We spent 3 sessions trying different exercises to help me see the pattern, looking at the ring through colored filters, under different types of light, reflected in curved mirrors, even using special glasses that were supposed to help with visual processing. Nothing worked, and I still saw the same beautiful oval diamond with sapphires that I'd always seen, while he kept making notes about my responses with this concerned look on his face. He suggested I attend a support group for people with visual processing disorders, saying it might help to talk to others with similar conditions. The group met in a community center basement every Tuesday night, about 12 people sitting in a circle talking about living with various types of agnosia and visual processing problems. When it was my turn to share, I explained my situation and showed the ring photos on my phone, and even these people who dealt with perception issues every day seemed uncomfortable. One woman said my case seemed uniquely severe, and the group leader suggested I might benefit from individual therapy rather than group sessions. I found an artist online who said she could paint visual interpretations of objects that people had trouble understanding. She worked out of a small studio downtown, and when I called her, she sounded hesitant, but agreed to meet after I explained my situation. The studio smelled like paint and turpentine, and she had canvases stacked everywhere against the walls. I showed her the ring photos on my phone, and she jerked back like I'd shown her something gross. She said she'd need $800 up front, and I couldn't watch her work or come back until she was done. I paid her cash, and she took the photos to study them, but kept holding my phone at arm's length. 3 days later, she called and said the painting was ready, but I had to come alone and take it wrapped. When I got to her studio, she had the painting already wrapped in thick brown paper with tape all around the edges. She handed it to me quick like it was hot and told me not to open it in public or around other people. She looked tired, and her hands were shaking a little when she gave me the package. I asked if she was okay, and she just said some things were harder to paint than others and practically pushed me out the door. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch and carefully peeled off the tape and unwrapped the brown paper. The painting showed a ring on a black background, and it looked exactly like what I'd always seen. The oval diamond caught the light perfectly, and the little blue sapphires sparkled around the band, just like in real life. I stared at it for an hour, trying to see something different, but it was just a beautiful painting of a beautiful ring. I wondered if she'd scammed me and just painted what any normal person would paint when asked to paint a ring. My sister lived 3 states away, so I called her on video chat and held up the painting to my laptop camera. She gasped so loud I thought something was wrong with her, and asked why I would have something like that painted. I told her the artist was supposed to show me what everyone else sees, and she said the artist had captured it perfectly. But when I looked at the painting again, it was still just the same normal ring I'd always seen. She asked me to put it away because she couldn't stand looking at it even through the computer screen. After she hung up, I started making a spreadsheet on my laptop to track every single reaction I'd gotten to the ring. I listed names, ages, genders, jobs, cultural backgrounds, and their exact reactions when they saw it. My coworker was 25, female, white, and had said it was certainly a choice. The pawn shop owner was maybe 60, male, Hispanic, and had refused to take it. Kiara's mom was 52, Korean, and had gasped and pulled Kiara aside. After 3 hours, I had 47 entries, and every single person, regardless of age or gender or background, had the same horrified response. I found contact info for researchers at a university who studied mass hysteria and shared delusions, and sent them my spreadsheet along with the ring photos. One researcher called me back within hours saying this was fascinating and asked if I could come to their lab for testing. I spent a whole day at the university doing perception tests and cognitive evaluations, while 3 researchers observed and took notes. They showed me the ring photos mixed with other jewelry photos, and I identified them instantly while they whispered to each other. At the end, they said the consistency of reactions across demographics suggested the issue was definitely with my perception, not everyone else's. They wanted to do brain scans, but I'd already had those done, and they came back normal, so they said this might be something new to science. A week later, I got an email from a documentary filmmaker who'd heard about my case from one of the researchers. She wanted to film my journey to understand what was happening and thought it would make a compelling documentary about perception and reality. We had 2 phone calls where she seemed really excited about the project and said she had funding lined up from a streaming service. But then she asked to see the ring photos for her lawyers to review before we signed contracts. She called back the next day and said her lawyers strongly advised against the project after seeing the photos, and she was sorry, but she had to pass. I was getting desperate, so I looked up hypnotherapist thinking maybe my subconscious could see what my conscious mind couldn't. The hypnotherapist was an older woman with a calm voice who said she'd helped people recover repressed memories and overcome mental blocks. In our first session, she put me under and had me describe the ring in detail while I was hypnotized. I talked about the oval diamond and the sapphires and the white gold band and how the light reflected off the facets. She brought me out of hypnosis and said I'd describe the same thing under hypnosis that I described while awake. We tried 3 more sessions with different techniques, but nothing changed, and I still couldn't see whatever everyone else saw. During our last session, she sat me down and said she was worried that my mind might be protecting me from something. She said sometimes our brains block things that would cause severe psychological damage, and forcing someone to see past that block could be dangerous. She suggested the block might be keeping me functional, and breaking through it could cause a mental breakdown or worse. She recommended I stop trying to force myself to see it, and accept that my brain had a good reason for protecting me. But I couldn't let it go, so I found a jeweler who specialized in redesigning problematic pieces like racist antique jewelry or rings from bad relationships. She said she could help, but she wouldn't look at the ring directly and would need to work from descriptions only. She suggested we could melt it down completely and start fresh with the golden stones, but I told her I needed to understand what went wrong first. She said sometimes in jewelry design, certain proportions and angles could create unintended visual effects that most people would find disturbing, but she'd need to study it more to give me specifics. She pulled out a notepad and started drawing circles and lines while talking about negative space between the oval and the band, creating what she called unfortunate convergence points. Her pencil moved across the paper, making weird angles and measurements, but when I looked at her drawing, it still just looked like normal ring sketches to me. She kept using words like asymmetrical tension and visual discord, but my eyes couldn't see any of what she was describing. After an hour of technical terms that meant nothing to me, I left more confused than when I'd arrived. 3 days later, I found an online listing for a design workshop at the local art college that focused on how shapes and proportions affect perception. The instructor was a woman in her 50s who wore thick glasses and had paint stains on her fingers. When I showed her the ring photo before class started, she actually stepped back and said this would be perfect for demonstrating when good intentions go horribly wrong. During her presentation, she put my ring photo on the projector but had pixelated it, so much you could barely make out the basic shape. She pointed at different parts of the blurry image, talking about how certain combinations of curves and angles could create deeply unsettling visual effects. The other students in the workshop kept nodding and taking notes, while I stared at the pixelated blob trying to understand what they were seeing. We did an exercise where we had to trace shapes with our fingers on paper without looking. When it was my turn to trace the ring's outline from memory, my fingers moved in smooth curves around the oval and small circles for the sapphires. But as my fingers moved, several people near me got up and left the room holding their stomachs. One woman actually gagged and ran to the bathroom. My fingers felt only smooth curves and normal shapes, but everyone else was having physical reactions to watching me trace. The instructor stopped me halfway through and said that was enough for the demonstration. After the workshop, I spent weeks searching online for specialists who understood visual perception disorders. Most doctors I contacted said they couldn't help once I mentioned the ring situation. But then I found a specialist 2 hours away who specifically worked with people who had my type of agnosia. Her office was in a medical building with lots of plants and soft lighting. She was younger than I expected, with curly hair and kind eyes. She explained that sometimes our brains protect us from seeing things that would cause severe psychological distress. She said the protection mechanism was actually keeping me functional, and breaking through it had to be done carefully. We started with a breakthrough technique she'd developed using gradual exposure therapy combined with guided visualization. First, we worked with simple shapes like triangles and squares on cards. She'd have me look at them while she described what she saw, and I'd try to see it too. We spent hours just looking at basic geometric patterns while she talked about angles and proportions. Then we moved to more complex patterns with overlapping shapes and curved lines. After 3 weeks of these exercises, she said we were ready to try with the actual ring. I brought it in its box, wrapped in a cloth, because she said she needed to prepare herself mentally before looking at it. She had me hold the ring while she sat across from me, describing each element in detail. She talked about the oval's specific dimensions and how the sapphires created a pattern around it. For just a second, I thought I saw something shift in the design, like the stones were moving, or the oval was changing shape, but then it was gone, and the ring looked normal again. We kept doing sessions twice a week for another month. Each time she'd have me look at the ring from different angles while she described what she saw. I started to notice that the proportions seemed slightly off somehow. The oval wasn't quite as perfect as I'd always thought. The sapphires around the band created an odd pattern that my eyes wanted to skip over. During one session, she brought out a curved mirror like the kind you see in parking garages. She had me hold the ring up and look at its reflection in the curved surface. The distortion from the mirror changed how the shapes appeared. For just 1 second, I saw it clearly. The oval and sapphires together formed something that made my stomach turn violently. It was like those optical illusions where you suddenly see the hidden image, except this hidden image was something deeply wrong. The image disappeared as quickly as it came, but now I knew it was there. I couldn't unsee the knowledge that something horrible was hidden in the design, even if I couldn't hold the actual image in my mind. My hands were shaking and I had to put the ring down. The specialist said this was progress, but we needed to be careful not to push too hard. Over the next few sessions, we worked on coping strategies for living with this knowledge. She helped me understand that my brain's protection mechanism was probably keeping me from having a complete breakdown. She said some people's minds create these blocks to maintain basic functioning when faced with something too disturbing to process. We practiced breathing exercises and grounding techniques for when I felt overwhelmed by the knowledge that something was wrong, even without seeing it fully. She recommended I keep the ring locked away and try not to think about it too much, but I couldn't stop wondering what exactly everyone else saw so clearly that my brain wouldn't let me see. I called around to find someone who would destroy the ring completely. Most jewelers wanted to melt it down for the gold and stones, but I needed it gone entirely. Finally found a guy downtown who worked with industrial equipment and agreed to do it. When I brought the ring in, he put on thick welding goggles and heavy work gloves before even opening the box. He used some kind of crushing machine first, then melted the pieces with a torch that burned way hotter than normal jewelry equipment. The whole process took less than 10 minutes, and when it was done, there was nothing left but slag that he swept into a hazardous waste container. Walking out of that shop, I felt my shoulders drop and realized I'd been holding them tight for months. My whole body felt lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy without knowing it. Over the next few weeks, people started acting normal around me again. My sister visited and said I looked better than I had in months and my skin had more color. At work, people stopped avoiding me in the hallways and started including me in lunch plans again. The change was so obvious that I knew the ring must have been affecting everything, even when it was just sitting in my apartment. I spent a long time thinking about whether to contact Kiara and finally decided to write her a letter. Her sister agreed to pass it along, but made it clear Kiara might not read it. I kept the letter short and didn't ask for anything back. Just wrote that I understood now that something was deeply wrong with the ring, even though I still couldn't fully see what it was. I told her I was sorry for putting her through that, and I understood why she had to leave. Her sister texted me a week later saying Kiara had read it and appreciated me acknowledging the problem. That was all, but it felt like some kind of closure. I kept going to therapy twice a week to work on understanding how this happened. We went through different times in my life when I'd missed obvious social cues or misread situations completely. There was a pattern of me not picking up on things that everyone else saw clearly. My therapist helped me develop strategies for checking with others when making important decisions. She taught me to look for consensus and trust it, even when I couldn't see the reason myself. 6 months passed and I was in a much better place mentally. I'd learned to accept that my perception was different from most people's in some fundamental way. Instead of fighting it or trying to force myself to see what others saw, I learned to work around it. When multiple people agreed something was off, I trusted them even without understanding why. This approach helped me avoid other problems I might have missed on my own. I started volunteering with a support group for people with different perception disorders. Some had face blindness, others couldn't process certain visual patterns, and a few had conditions similar to mine. Sharing my story helped them feel less alone and crazy. They helped me understand that having a different way of seeing the world wasn't necessarily bad, just different. We had to be more careful and rely on others more, but we could still live normal lives. After 8 months, I felt ready to try dating again. I was upfront about my perception issues without going into the whole ring story. Most people were understanding, and some were even curious about how I experienced the world differently. When I started seeing someone regularly, I made sure to let her pick out any jewelry or gifts that involved visual design. She appreciated my honesty and said it showed growth that I recognized my limitations. We took things slow, and I constantly checked in with her friends and family to make sure I wasn't missing any red flags. Looking back now, the whole ring incident taught me more about myself than years of normal life would have. I learned that sometimes our brains protect us from seeing certain things, and that protection might be what keeps us functional. I learned to trust others when they all see something I don't. Most importantly, I learned that being different doesn't mean being wrong. It just means needing to be more careful and humble about my limitations. The ring is gone, but the lessons it taught me will stick with me forever. That was such a sweet ride. Thanks for letting me share it with you. I'm honestly just glad you're here. If you'd like to join me again, make sure you subscribe and keep the good vibes rolling.